Corporal Jax staggered forward, pressing a blood-soaked hand against his side. His armor was cracked, his breathing ragged, but he was still standing. "Damn, that stings," he muttered. The battlefield around him was chaos. Smoking craters, shattered debris. The metallic scent of plasma burns mixed with the sharper tang of blood. Bodies, both human and alien, littered the ground. The air shimmered with heat from recent explosions. The enemy, a brutal insectoid race known as the Croth, had finally retreated, leaving behind a wasteland of destruction. Jax felt a warm trickle down his ribs. He glanced down at the jagged tear in his armor, where a Croth blade had slipped through. The cut was deep, but not life-threatening. Probably a couple of stitches, maybe a mild infection if he got unlucky. He'd had worse. A sharp gasp came from his left. He turned to see High Healer Vorek of the Circanian Relief Team, frozen mid-step, his eyes locked on Jax's wound. The Circanian's bioluminescent skin flickered erratically, a telltale sign of absolute horror in his species. "By the void," Vorek whispered, his voice strained. "He's bleeding. He's still moving. Gods above, he doesn't even know." Jax blinked. "What?" Before he could react, the healer's trembling fingers activated his communicator. "Emergency. Code Crimson. All available medical units. Respond immediately." The call was met with a rapid burst of alien voices, overlapping in alarmed tones. Jax turned his head, just in time, to see an entire unit of Circanian medics sprinting toward him with the kind of urgency one might expect for a dying monarch. "Hold on now." Jax tried to wave them off, but his arm was swiftly seized. Cold, rubbery hands gripped his limbs, blue lens scanners flashed across his body, and within seconds, his vision swam with the overwhelming glow of bioreadouts. Blood loss exceeding survivable levels. Immediate shutdown of vital functions predicted. He requires full-body stabilization. Jack scowled, trying to step back. "Guys, it's just a scratch." His words had the exact opposite effect of what he intended. Vorek let out a strangled noise, somewhere between a sob and a horrified shriek. The medics tightened their grips, one of them jabbing something into Jax's arm. A hiss of compressed air shot through his veins, sending an icy sensation racing up his shoulder. "Hey!" Jax twisted, but his limbs were already sluggish. The world wobbled around him. "Remain calm, Corporal," Vorek said, though his voice was shaking. "We will do everything we can to save you." Jax tried to protest, but his tongue felt heavy, his knees buckled, and his vision blurred. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the flash of the Circanian insignia on the side of a med transport, its engines roaring to life. Jax awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptics and the soft hum of medical machinery. He was lying on an examination table, weightless restraints locking him in place. Dim blue lighting glowed from the walls, casting eerie shadows across a room filled with floating medical drones and holographic readouts. The voices came first, heart rate stabilizing. Impossible. His system should have collapsed by now. Cellular regeneration active without augmentation. A sharper voice cut through the murmurs. "He's waking up." Jax groaned, blinking blearily as a dozen anxious Circanian faces came into focus. Their normally smooth, iridescent skin was flickering in rapid, distressed patterns. He barely had time to process before one of them lunged forward and pressed a hand to his forehead. "How are you still conscious?" the medic whispered. Jax sighed. "Because I'm not dying." The entire room recoiled as one. Several medics clutched their chests in what looked like genuine terror. One of them fumbled with a scanner, running it over Jax's wound as if expecting him to burst into flames at any moment. Vorek himself stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Corporal Jax, you have lost approximately 1 liter of blood. Your body should be in shock. Your organs should be failing. You should be dead." Jax shifted slightly, testing his restraints. "Well, I'm not. So how about you let me up, and—" A strangled noise escaped Vorek's throat. "No sudden movements. Your system is moments from collapse." Jax gritted his teeth. "I walked here. I was fine before you sedated me." "Walked," Vorek repeated in a hollow voice. The others exchanged glances, their bioluminescence cycling through chaotic, frantic colors. A deep sense of unease settled in Jax's gut. He had encountered cultural differences before. Humans had always been seen as tough by galactic standards. But this level of hysteria was something else entirely. You truly do not comprehend the severity of your injury, do you? Vorek whispered. He gestured toward a nearby console, and a holographic display flickered to life. Jax stared as footage played back, snippets of previous human engagements across the galaxy. Soldiers hauling themselves out of crash wreckage with broken bones. Marines laughing as their wounds were stitched shut in the middle of a firefight. A civilian engineer with second-degree burns calmly applying her own bandages before finishing her repairs. Your kind does not respond to injury in a way that makes any sense, Vorek murmured. His gaze locked onto Jax, searching, desperate. Do you even feel pain? Jax snorted. Of course we do. We just don't let it stop us. Another wave of horrified silence. One of the younger medics made a wheezing sound and sat down hard on a nearby stool. This is an emergency, Vorek finally said, voice steely with resolve. A galactic emergency. Jax's stomach dropped. Wait, what? The high healer straightened. We cannot allow this to go unexamined. We must understand your biology before it disrupts everything we know about sentient life. Jax narrowed his eyes. Before what disrupts everything? Vorek hesitated, then turned to the console and brought up another set of reports. Data transmissions already flagged with priority markers. They're sending your medical readings to the Galactic Council, Vorek admitted, and to every scientific institute in the sector. This changes everything. Jax swore under his breath. Before he could respond, a shrill alert blared through the room. A holographic projection of a Circanian fleet officer materialized in the center of the chamber, his expression grim. High Healer, we have a situation. The Galactic Council has just issued a sector-wide medical advisory regarding the human species. The designation is unprecedented. Vorek stiffened. What designation? The officer's eyes flicked to Jax with unmistakable unease. Category X, extreme biological durability. Effective immediately, all Deathworlders are to be handled with utmost caution. Jax let his head thunk back against the table. Asterisk, you've got to be kidding me. Asterisk. The entire medical bay was already spiraling into a frenzy, alarms blaring, protocols shifting. Jax barely had time to process the sheer absurdity of it before the realization sank in. He wasn't going anywhere. And if the galaxy had just learned what humans were capable of, he had a feeling this was only the beginning. Jax woke to the sensation of something cold pressed against his forehead and the frantic whispers of people who genuinely thought he was dying. His vitals are holding steady, one voice said, breathless with disbelief. They shouldn't be, another snapped. No known species can suffer that level of trauma and still function. Have we miscalculated? Is he moments from catastrophic failure? A sigh. At this point, I'm afraid anything is possible. Jax groaned, forcing his heavy eyelids open. The moment his gaze focused, the room erupted into a flurry of movement. Medics surged forward, scanners in hand, their bioluminescent skin flickering in frantic patterns of yellow and white. Fear and urgent concern. He barely had time to sit up before a hand pressed firmly against his chest, pushing him back down. Do not move, Vorek ordered, his normally smooth voice tight with strain. You are on the very edge of biological collapse. Your body is in a fragile, unprecedented state. Jax blinked at him. I feel fine. A collective gasp swept through the medical bay. Someone knocked over a tray of instruments in shock. Vorek took a step back, as if Jax had just admitted to being an eldritch horror in disguise. You feel fine? He repeated, voice nearly shrill. Jax exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. Yes, because I am fine. You cannot be fine, Vorek hissed. You lost over a liter of blood. That's like a bad afternoon, not a death sentence, Jax said, exasperated. Seriously, let me up. More horrified whispers. Jax glanced around, realizing just how many sets of wide, glowing eyes were watching him. Some of the younger medics looked like they were on the verge of passing out. Vorek rubbed his temples, his own light flickering in uneven waves. This is madness. Jack sighed. Look, I get that this is weird for you, but humans are tough. This isn't even close to the worst I've been through. Vorek's fingers twitched. Not the worst. The tension in the room thickened, the horror in their eyes deepening. The nearest medic was gripping a datapad, so tightly his fingers were turning a sickly shade of green. Jax tilted his head, sensing an opportunity. Want to hear about the time my buddy got impaled by a metal beam and still walked himself to the med bay? A strangled sound escaped one of the nurses. Someone else dry heaved into a waste bin. Vorek's hands clenched into fists. You cannot be serious. Dead serious. Jax grinned. We called him Shishkev after that. Vorek made a noise that sounded half like a scream and half like static interference. This is not normal. For humans, it is, Jax said with a shrug. Another murmur rippled through the room. Jax could feel the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts pressing against him. The sheer disbelief painted across every alien face. Vorek inhaled deeply, as if steadying himself before speaking. You don't understand what you've done. Jax raised an eyebrow. Oh, enlighten me. The healer gestured toward a floating display. It shifted, revealing a galactic data network, its usual lines of scrolling text and graphs now overridden by a single flashing alert. Emergency biological discovery. Species 0047. H, human. Classified as Category X. Extreme durability. Jax frowned. Vorek turned to him, his expression grim. The entire Galactic Medical Council is now aware of your biology. The Council of Ethics is investigating whether human pain receptors function at all. And worst of all, he exhaled sharply, his bioluminescence dimming to a solemn blue. The military divisions of half the known galaxy are panicking. Jax blinked. Panicking why? Vorek stared at him like he was an idiot. Because, Corporal, you have just shattered every known standard for biological resilience. You and your species have effectively rewritten what is possible for a sentient life form. There are already murmurs among the High Command that if a species like yours exists, a species that can sustain grievous injuries and shrug them off, then humanity is not merely an ally or an independent force. You are a threat. Jax ran a hand down his face. So, what? Some bureaucrats got nervous because we don't crumple like paper when we get a boo-boo? Vorek's eye twitched. You refer to major hemorrhaging as a boo-boo. Jax shrugged. Look, man, we just handle pain differently. You think I'm bad? You should see our athletes. I saw a guy finish a game once with a dislocated shoulder, and he still scored the winning goal. Vorek looked seconds away from fainting. How have you not conquered the galaxy already? Jax snorted. Because we like having people to talk to, Vorek. The High Healer shook his head, clearly trying to regain some semblance of composure. Regardless, the damage is done. Governments are watching. Scientists are demanding access to human medical records. The Circanian Science Division has already proposed a full study into your kind's biology. Jax's stomach twisted. A study? Vorek hesitated. The ethicality of it is under debate. Some believe it is imperative to understand your physiology for the sake of medical advancement. Others are concerned. Concerned. Jax narrowed his eyes. Concerned about what? Exactly? Vorek's glow dimmed further. That humanity's resilience is unnatural. That it defies the natural laws of organic life. Some believe it is. He hesitated, voice dipping to a whisper. Asterisk, dangerous asterisk to the fabric of galactic stability. Jax let out a low whistle. You're telling me the entire galaxy is losing their minds over the fact that we don't die easily? Yes, Vorek said flatly. Jax let his head thunk back against the medical bed. Well, that's just great. Vorek rubbed his temples. This is no longer a mere medical misunderstanding, Corporal. It is a diplomatic crisis. Your people may soon face restrictions, mandatory examinations, possibly even exclusion from certain interstellar treaties. Jack scowled. That's ridiculous. Perhaps. But fear is a powerful force, and right now, you and your kind are its source. Silence hung between them. The weight of the revelation settled deep into Jax's bones. This wasn't just about him anymore. Jax exhaled slowly. So what now? Vorek hesitated, then straightened. For now, you remain here under observation. The Galactic Council is convening within the next day to determine an official response. Until then, you are not to leave this facility. Jax's jaw clenched. You're detaining me? Vorek looked pained. It's for your safety, as well as ours. There are those who... He hesitated, then sighed. Let's just say that not everyone sees your resilience as a miracle. Some see it as an abomination. Jax closed his eyes for a brief moment, his mind racing. This was spiraling out of control faster than he could keep up with. When he opened them, his expression was steely. I need to contact my superiors. Vorek nodded. That has already been arranged. Your fleet is en route. Jax exhaled through his nose. Good, but deep in his gut, he knew this was only going to get worse before it got better. Jax barely had time to process his predicament before the alarms blared. A deep, warbling klaxon resonated through the medical facility, followed by a sharp, synthesized voice. Security breach detected. Unauthorized personnel within restricted medical zone. Vorek paled, his bioluminescent skin flickering wildly. No. Not this soon. Jax shot upright, yanking at the medical restraints. You mind telling me what the hell is going on? Before the healer could answer, the doors burst open. 3 figures in dark, reinforced armor stormed in, their weapons raised. Their visors glowed with an eerie crimson light, the insignia on their shoulders unmistakable. *** Interstellar Ethics Division. ***. Jax's gut clenched. He had heard of them before. They weren't medics. They weren't soldiers. They were something worse. Enforcers of galactic stability, answerable only to the highest echelons of the Galactic Council. And if they were here, that meant someone had decided humanity's resilience was no longer just an anomaly. It was a problem. One of the armored figures stepped forward. Corporal Jax, you are hereby placed under direct custody of the Galactic Council, pending further investigation into the anomalous biological properties of your species. Jax tensed. Oh yeah? On what charges? The figure's helmet tilted slightly. Existing. Jax barely had time to react before one of the enforcers raised a sleek, cylindrical device and pressed the trigger. A pulse of energy lashed out, striking him square in the chest. Pain tore through him. Not the sharp, familiar sting of a bullet wound or the burning aftermath of a plasma shot. This was different, deeper, colder, like something was tearing at the very essence of his body. He gritted his teeth against the shock, his limbs locking up. He should have collapsed, should have lost consciousness. But he didn't. Instead, something in his body fought back. The pain dulled, the paralysis waned, and within seconds, Jax was moving again. The lead enforcer recoiled. Impossible. Jax's lips curled into a dangerous smirk. Yeah, I get that a lot. Then he lunged. His body was still sluggish from the aftershock, but years of combat instincts took over. He drove his shoulder into the nearest enforcer, sending them crashing into a medical console. Sparks erupted from the machinery as Jax spun, yanking a fallen weapon from the floor. Stand down, one of the enforcers barked, but Jax was already moving. A single shot rang out. A blue-white arc of plasma seared through the air, forcing Jax to twist out of the way. The bolt slammed into the ceiling, sending chunks of debris cascading down. In the chaos, Vorek shouted something, his voice nearly drowned out by the wailing alarms. Jax didn't have time to listen. His priority was getting the hell out of here. He dove behind a console, breathing hard. The enforcers weren't just here to take him in. They were prepared to neutralize him if necessary. And that meant negotiation wasn't on the table. A sudden whoosh filled the air, followed by a sharp crack. Jax peeked out just in time to see Vorek standing in front of him, arms outstretched, his skin pulsing with erratic bursts of color. Asterisk enough? Asterisk, the healer shouted. This is a medical facility, not a battlefield. The lead enforcer hesitated, weapons still trained on Jax. High healer, step aside. You do not comprehend the danger this being presents. Vorek's expression darkened. I comprehend far more than you ever will. A tense silence stretched between them. Then the entire room jolted. The floor beneath them trembled, the walls shuddering as the unmistakable hum of a warship's atmospheric entry roared through the facility's structure. Jax's heart pounded. His fleet was here. The Enforcers' helmets twitched as they received new transmissions. Incoming human vessel, designation Valkyrie, requesting immediate access to detained personnel. Jax smirked. Guess my ride's here. The lead Enforcer clenched his fist. This isn't over. Before he could give the order to fire, the facility shook again, this time from the impact of a docking sequence being forcefully overridden. A low, mechanical hiss echoed through the air as bulkhead doors groaned open. And then, stepping through the haze of steam and flashing emergency lights, came Commander Rourke. Jax had never been so relieved to see his CEO's scowling face. Rourke didn't even spare the Enforcers a glance. His steely eyes locked onto Jax, assessing him in an instant. You good, Corporal? Jax cracked his neck. Better now. The commander nodded once, then turned to the Enforcers. Stand down. Corporal Jax is coming with us. The lead Enforcer tensed. This is a classified medical investigation, which has now turned into an interstellar diplomatic incident. Rourke interrupted coolly. You think you can just detain a human soldier without repercussions? The United Terran Fleet will not stand for this. The tension in the room thickened. The Enforcers' grips tightened on their weapons, but they hesitated. The arrival of a fully armed Terran warship had clearly thrown a wrench in their plans. Vorek stepped forward again, his gaze flickering between both parties. This does not need to escalate further. Rourke exhaled sharply. No, it doesn't. But I promise you, if anyone tries to lay a hand on my soldier again, escalation will be the least of your concerns. The Enforcers exchanged silent, encrypted messages. Then, finally, reluctantly, the lead officer lowered his weapon. This is not over, he said again, but with less conviction this time. Jax smirked. Yeah, you mentioned that already. Without another word, Rourke turned and motioned for Jax to follow. As they strode toward the waiting Valkyrie, Jax glanced back at Vorek. The high healer was watching him with an unreadable expression, his glow subdued. Thanks for the backup, Jax said. Vorek nodded slowly. I did not do this for you. I did it for balance. Jax frowned. What does that mean? Vorek hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, You're kind. You are not like the others. That will terrify many. He exhaled. I fear what comes next. Jax didn't have an answer for that. So instead, he turned and followed his commander into the ship, the weight of Vorek's words lingering like a shadow. The Valkyrie tore through the void at speeds that made lesser ships shudder apart, but Jax barely noticed the hum of the engines beneath his boots. His mind was elsewhere, on Vorek's warning, on the Enforcer's weapons aimed at his chest, on the fact that the galaxy itself now saw him as a problem to be solved. Across from him in the warship's command deck, Commander Rourke stood with arms crossed, his sharp eyes scanning the latest reports flooding in from the fleet's diplomatic channels. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, the commander exhaled through his nose. This situation is worse than we thought. Jax arched a brow. Define worse. Rourke turned the display toward him. The Galactic Council is officially classifying humans as a potential strategic destabilizer. We're under review for military containment measures. If they pass that ruling, he exhaled, rubbing his temple. Every human in interstellar space could be subject to forced medical studies, travel restrictions, hell, even quarantine. Jax frowned. Quarantine? We're not a damn plague. No, Rourke said grimly. But we're an unknown, and that scares them more than any virus ever could. Jax clenched his fists. This is insane. Welcome to politics, Rourke muttered. The only reason they haven't outright banned us yet is because they know what'll happen if they try to force the issue. Earth won't just roll over. Jax ran a hand down his face. So what's the play? Rourke's lips pressed into a thin line. High Command is in emergency talks with the Council. But the truth is we don't have the numbers or the political clout to strong-arm our way through this. If they decide to lock us out, our options will be limited. Jack scoffed. You mean we be screwed? More or less. Silence settled between them. Jax could feel the weight of it pressing into his bones. He had been trained for 1,000 different scenarios, hostile encounters, deep space warfare, survival in conditions that would turn most people inside out. But he hadn't trained for this. You should know, Rourke continued. Vorex submitted an official testimony on your behalf. Jax blinked. You what? Rourke nodded. His report is the only reason the Council hasn't already issued detainment orders. He argued that humanity's resilience isn't an aberration, it's an adaptation. That it's no different than a species evolving venom, or infrared vision, or rapid cellular regeneration. Jack snorted. Let me guess. That didn't exactly calm everyone down. If anything, it made things worse, Rourke admitted. Now the military branches are really paying attention. Jax exhaled slowly. They think we're some kind of superweapon, don't they? Rourke's silence was answer enough. Jax shook his head. This is ridiculous. Maybe, Rourke said, but perception is reality in galactic politics. And right now, the reality is that humans just went from curious newcomers to existential question mark. Jax leaned back against the console, his mind racing. So what do we do? Rourke was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, we make them see us as people, not anomalies, not weapons, just people. Jax let out a bitter laugh. Yeah? And how the hell do we do that? We start with a hearing. Jax stilled. Hearing. The Council is holding an emergency session in 2 days. They're bringing in representatives from every major faction to discuss humanity's status. High Command is sending an envoy. Jax frowned. Who? Rourke met his gaze. You. Jax blinked. Me? Rourke nodded. They don't want a politician, Jax. They want someone real, someone who can look them in the eye and tell them what it means to be human. And after everything that's happened, he gestured toward Jax's still healing injuries, his sheer refusal to die. You're the best damn proof we've got. Jax ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. That's insane. Maybe, Rourke admitted, but it's our best shot. Jax stared at the floor, his pulse hammering. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't a strategist. He was a soldier, a man who had spent his career breaking things, not fixing them. And yet, he thought of the Enforcer's fear. The way the medics had stared at him like he wasn't even real. The way Vorek had spoken, equal parts fascinated and afraid. The galaxy didn't understand humans. Maybe it was time to change that. Jax took a deep breath and straightened. All right, he said. Let's do this. Rourke gave him a firm nod. We'll brief you on everything before we arrive. You'll have full fleet support. Jax smirked. Good, because something tells me this is going to be one hell of a conversation. And as the Valkyrie hurtled toward its uncertain destination, Jax could only hope the galaxy was finally ready to listen.